So this is video number 2, adding boards, cables and editing. So we're going to have a little general chat about adding some boards, putting some cables in, how to get into cables, edit cables, etc. So on the insert electrical menu at the top, we have two basic types of board. We have main distribution board, so that would be a main distribution board with a submain going to it and a submain going from it, such as an LV switchboard, a motor control center, etc. The other type of board we have is a final board with final lighting circuits, ring mains, etc. So there is a distinction between the two. And it's the distinction between the two that we break our voltage drop down. So on final circuits, we have that 4% final boards, and we also have the 4% on the feeds to and from submain boards. So first of all, to put a board in, I'm going to start off with my LV switchboard, place it on the layout, and then we have our general information. Number of ways I would advise you not to set up at this point, because it means you have to be very, very precise in how you lay your cables and boards out effectively. When you set your system up in sort of tree formation, you'd have to work from the outside towards the middle of the board. By leaving the number of ways at 0, it's flexible, so you can lay your boards out however you wish. You can introduce a cable between other cables. It moves the other cable on the board along to the next way and allows you to insert cables between existing cables. So it makes for a better and easier layout. I'll show you what I mean by that as I build the system up later on. I'll refer back to this. Maximum board rating, again, you don't really need to put that in. You can do if you know the rating of the board that you're going to put in from the manufacturer. And there's the standard CPD type on the board. Now, all commands in the wiring program are active all the time. You'll notice on the end of my mouse is another board. Now, it's not my intention to place another board. Pressing escape breaks the command. That's the same for cables or any of the loads that you're adding from these menus. So escape breaks the command and allows you to move on to something else. Now, there's no real hard and fast rules in setting up a wiring project here. I could place another board in and put a load on it and then add my cables, or I could add a cable in from my transformer into my main board. So if I do that, selecting the cable option, I click once on the transformer logo, once on the main board, and I can then put the cable length and the cable reference. And also selecting the cable type, installation method, and the switchgear device I want on here. Now, even though earlier on I selected BS88s, likely as not, the main supply will be a lot different, and it will be generally different to the main submain protection feeding the boards and loads as well. So I'm going to leave that set to none for the time being. In fact, to take a flyer on it, I'll just stick a BS88 in there for now, and again we can adjust that. Selecting OK. Again, what I can see here is that the now we've interconnected the cable, you can see the transformer symbol is in green. That means it's switched on. And you'll also notice a slight kink in that cable. I could grab this board and physically move it around. You can actually use the snaps. There are snap settings. In the bottom corner you've got OS and N. S is the grid snap. You can switch it on and off. So there's a slight misalignment between the board, so you can move the board across slightly. And you notice how it suddenly jumps and snaps. So sometimes it's better to actually switch it off. So in this case I'm going to switch it off. I'm going to move my board up. What I can also do with the board, I can grab grips and I can stretch the board. And obviously the cable will go with the board. So if you like to design your system with a board occupying the whole bottom of the screen with straight ways coming straight off instead of a tree formation, then you can do that as well. So you can grab these little grips and then you can stretch or compress the board accordingly. And this feature comes in quite handy when you're wanting to print out from final boards, because as you build your board up, you'll find that the circuits become all squashed in on the existing default board size. So it's always best to go in and stretch it when you come out, so that when you do a printout, you can see all those ways on the board. Notice the transformer is in green. We're going to look at multiple supplies in another video, but to switch the transformer on and off, it's merely a case of going to the cable and selecting the off button. So you'd have an isolator on there typically, and that switches it off, and that's now low lighted, so it's no longer in green. So whenever the transformer is in green, that means it's actually on and active. So that will be relevant later on when we come and look at our alternate supplies. If I want to add a final board, I could set up a network, a sort of skeletal early doors network, where I can just put a load on a final board. So if I go into a final board, I can place the board on the layout, put the general reference on the board, and I can put the load and power factor on the board. Defaulting to 0.95, again the defaults will dictate the power factor, so I can change this. And also, again, the next board comes along, I can press escape. If I double click on the board, I can revisit it. And if I had an unbalanced load, you can see I can then put an unbalanced load on there. Or if I wanted a single phase board, I would just select the phase that I want to apply the load to. So I'll go back to balanced, reinstate it. And also you've got the kVA rating as well, so you can have kVA or amps conversion. To connect the cable, okay, select the cable option, select the board, run the cable into the board with one click, put the cable length on there. I can put the cable reference in there as well. But I think in a slightly later version that will happen automatically. It will pick up the reference from the board you connect into. That will happen automatically, due for release soon, so that will be slightly different. Cable type, installation method. While we're in here, this is the cable entry details. So we have different details we can enter. Going to the details button, this takes us into the cable itself. So we can see here the cable type, the installation method, the length, the core type. You can view the ratings. Once you've performed a calculation, you can actually view the rating of the cable from the database. So this is a sort of little snapshot into the database where you can see the current rating of the cable for the particular installation method. Whether or not your cable is subject to simultaneous overload, whether or not you want to use flexi conductors, and then of course we have the description of the cable and then your CPC, how you're handling the cable. This is a low smoke and fumes armoured cable where the armouring is the CPC, so that was what we would consider as normal. I could run a separate if I wanted to, or if there's an earth fault failure, I could run a supplementary, and that would supplement the armouring. And of course, if it's unfixed, the program will calculate it for you, or you can fix it. So again, if you are doing an inventory of an existing system for facilities management purposes, everything here can be fixed. You can fix the CPD, the CPC, and the CPD as well. So here we can fix any of these. We could fix the supplementary. The separate could be fixed, as we can with the cable. You can see in the bottom left corner here, we've got our cable sizes, so we can fix those. We can parallel up the cable. Again, mentioned in the previous video on the Edit General, if you exceed the maximum cable size that we set up in Edit General, it will start paralleling up anyway. But again, you can control that and decide how you want your cable arrangements. Transformer tails, for example, on the supply you might want to put in. So we'll leave that set as normal. ERA derate there is greyed out because the installation method is perforated tray. Should I then go and select ERA air, ground or duct, that allows me to use the Electrical Research Agency calculation for derating. We'll do a video on that later. And the same with the IET methods as well. But that's driven by the installation method. Very much driven by the installation method there. We'll put that in perforated tray as we had before. Now that cable detail came up when I connected it in. I might want to revisit the cable. To simply revisit the cable, double click on it. There you go. There's the cable entry dialog. There you go into the details. And of course we've got the CPD details, so we can revisit those as well. So we can go into details. We can review our range of devices. So as we build the system up, we might find the fault level isn't suitable for the devices we've selected. So we might want to revise that selection. We can fix devices. And also we can apply surge protection. We can put generic RCD settings in here. So if we have RCDs, we can set those. Or we can pick from a range of manufacturers' devices from the listings. So we can use the manufacturer's settings. So all of the CPD, circuit protective device, switchgear information can be set at cable level as well. There are several cable colours worth noting as well. For example, cyan means it's just a floating cable, it's going to be calculated. If I click on it once, that just happens to mean it's selected. I double click on it and fix anything. So for example, if I go into the details and fix the cable size or fix a breaker or anything like that, that cable is dark blue. Dark blue implies it's fixed. So if you start fixing cables and you get problems with the cables themselves, it's probably because you fixed them and restricted for the given load or length of voltage drop. So that cable will then go red. Obviously we have no problems on this circuit at the moment, but when problems arise, the board or the cable will go bright red. You can access that and then you can solve the problem. I'm sure as we build this project up during these videos, we will get some problems, and I can cross that bridge when we come to it, and I'll show you how to solve various problems. So this is really about just adding the boards and setting up the system. So we'll unfix that cable, into the details, unfixed. Also, the on-screen manuals are helpful. If there are some issues, it's always best to go to the on-screen manuals before you phone us up, because there's a lot of information in there. F1 on the keyboard brings up the manual and it shows you exactly where you are. So it's relative to the dialog box you currently have open, and you will find a whole load of intuitive text where you can then go in and interrogate, and this gives you much more information on here as well. Bit of advice here, always best to close the manual down when you finish with it. Otherwise what happens is if you minimize it and you go off to do something else, it will only bring back what you were doing 2 hours ago, which is totally irrelevant. So always close the manual down when you finish with it. So that concludes video 2. We'll move on to build the network up and show you different functionality as we progress through the training video.